There's something about a dead man's name that pulls the truth out of people. And the lies, too. Rich Homie Quan passed away after an accidental drug overdose, and for a moment, the entire rap world went quiet. The man who helped define an era of Atlanta music was gone. But what nobody expected is that months after his passing, his name would still be sitting at the center of one of the messiest ongoing conversations in hip-hop, and that this week it would explode all over again, pulling in Young Thug, Quan's own brother, his closest affiliates, and Ralo, all in the same handful of days. It started with what looked like a simple tribute. Young Thug went on his Instagram and posted a throwback video of himself and Rich Homie Quan in the studio together, rapping along to their song, Tell 'Em.
And they go to all the money that Romeo ain't got money for get a child for the money. 280.
On the surface, it looked like grief. A man missing someone he used to be close to, but the caption was, what lit the fuse? Thug wrote, never switched on you, brada, always rode with you, what happened? That one line cracked something open. Because if you know the real timeline between these two, you know that statement carries 10 years of unresolved weight behind it. Billboard Kesev. Back in 2014, Thug and Quan were the undisputed kings of the Atlanta sound. From Lifestyle to Thaw Tour Part 1, they weren't just a duo, they were family. They built something real, something that felt authentic in a way that label-created partnerships never do. Their collaboration, Lifestyle, reached number 16 on the Billboard Hot 100 and topped the R&B/hip-hop airplay chart. These were two young men from the same city riding the same wave, eating together, building together. And then, suddenly, they weren't. Things started falling apart when Thugger called Quan Rich Homie Quan during a performance and said, FCK Rich Homie, at a separate show in California. That wasn't a slip of the tongue in the heat of a moment. That was a deliberate public humiliation directed at someone he used to call a brother. So when Thug resurfaced with that tribute post claiming he never switched, people immediately pushed back. Quan's brother, who goes by Rich Homie Dre, commented pride and ego with a face-palming emoji, while close affiliate Rich Homie Manta wrote, don't ride for me then, alongside his own facepalm. These aren't strangers throwing hate from the internet. Rich Homie Dre is blood. He watched this situation unfold from inside the family. Rich Homie Manta was there in the streets, in the studios, living the same life as Quan. When those two men specifically respond the way they did, that's not just social media noise. That's people who are actually there, telling you the story looks different from where they stood. Now, a lot of people would have taken that reaction, posted a few hearts, and stayed quiet. Thug is not built like that. He went straight to his Instagram stories and fired off a series of posts laying out his version of events. He didn't just defend himself in general terms either. He went specific. He brought up YFN Lucci, explaining that he refused to work with Lucci because Quan had a problem with him at the time, saying Quan felt that Lucci had done a song with someone who had dissed him. That's a real sacrifice in the music industry. Turning down a collaboration, potentially losing money and momentum because your partner doesn't want you in that space. Thug was saying, I chose you when it cost me something. Don't act like I wasn't loyal. He also put on record that it was actually Quan who stepped away from their bond, feeling like he was bigger on his own. Wiver, that's a painful thing to say about someone who died without either of them ever patching things up. And it's the kind of claim that splits a room. Half the people reading that see a man defending his name. The other half see someone using a post-mortem platform to rewrite a story that the other person can no longer correct. But neither of those posts was the one that made everyone stop scrolling. Thug dropped what he described as a direct response to Rich Homie Dre calling his claim cap, revealing in his stories that Quan had allegedly been positioned to testify against him in the YSL Riceo trial, and that this was set to happen the very week Quan died. He wrote directly to Dre, essentially saying, you're calling it a lie, so tell them what was really about to happen. Dre responded on his own story with, bet $1 million we ain't cooperate, I got receipts, making it clear he was not going to let that accusation stand unchallenged. Think about what that exchange actually means. Young Thug spent years locked inside one of the most high-profile RICO cases in the history of rap music. His entire life was on the line, and now he's publicly stating that the man he once built an empire with was going to take the stand against him. Whether that's true or not, saying it out loud on Instagram for the whole world to see is not a small thing. It permanently changes how people remember the relationship. It adds a layer to Quan's story that his family now has to live with and that his brother is actively fighting against in public. Even while making that allegation, Thug wrote, "I still love him and wish he was here though. I know I wouldn't have walked past him sleeping on the floor, and that's what makes this so hard to process simply." He's expressing genuine love and genuine grievance in the same breath. He believes this man was prepared to testify against him, and he also says he would have never walked past him in a vulnerable moment. That kind of complicated love is real. It's human, but it's also the kind of thing that does damage when it plays out in public, aimed at a family that's still grieving. He then went a step further and addressed Quan's parents directly, writing that Quan's dad knows he has always been respectful, that he was present when Quan went through his hardships, and that he's not the reason he died. He pointed the finger at those around Quan, saying he always told Quan to stop drinking and stop taking pills, and that the people around him made sure he had access to those substances when he woke up every morning. That is an explosive accusation aimed at Quan's inner circle. It shifts the grief narrative entirely. Now, it's not just about who was loyal in the friendship. It's about who was responsible for the environment that led to Quan's death. Dre's broader response was that pride and ego had driven the two apart, and that Thug's public framing glossed over years of unresolved tension. He pointed to Quan's documented openness about wanting to reconnect, framing it as proof that the door had been open, and Thug chose not to walk through it. And the painful truth is, Quan had said publicly, not long before he died, that he was open to a conversation and willing to see where it led. That reconciliation never materialized. Both men let time pass, and now only one of them is here to keep arguing about what that silence meant. Into all of this walked Ralo, and his entry into the conversation made everything more layered. Ralo recently inserted himself by posting a blunt, two-word reaction: Thug, ESNTASDF, short, direct, and loaded with everything that has gone on between these two men over the past year. Months earlier, Ralo had called into a popular live stream hosted by DJ Academics and accused Young Thug of actively trying to ruin Rich Homie Quan's career and Guna's career, claiming that Thug had a pattern of turning the entire Atlanta rap community against one another. His exact words were that Thug turned the whole world against Rich Homie Quan and then turned around and did the same thing to Guna when Guna started surpassing people commercially. He framed Thug not as a victim of Atlanta's chaos, but as someone who quietly engineered a lot of it. Ralo also brought up his own situation, claiming that he lost his friendship with Lil Baby because of Thug's influence and actions behind the scenes. That's a pattern he was describing, not isolated incidents, but a consistent way of operating. And when you line those claims up against everything that's happened this week with Quan's family, it hits different, because now Thug is out here saying he was the loyal one, while Ralo is saying the opposite, that Thug has spent years quietly pulling strings that destroyed relationships he was never visibly part of. Thug didn't let that go unanswered either. He fired back directly, accusing Ralo of having agreed to take the stand against both him and YFN Lushi to secure his own release, and drawing a distinction between what he called an honest mistake in a police conversation versus what Ralo allegedly did. He wrote that he tried to free his people, while Ralo tried to put his people away. Ralo shot back demanding paperwork, calling out what he said was a pattern of Thug making accusations without producing proof, and adding that in the streets, paperwork is law. Ralo also stated publicly that he would have no problem sitting in a room with Thug, but made it clear he would not tolerate someone acting like a boss when he hadn't put in the work to earn it. What Ralo's involvement does to this situation is add a third perspective on Young Thug's character. one that goes beyond the Quan family's grief. Dre is fighting for his brother's legacy. That's personal, emotional, and understandable. But Ralo's accusations are institutional. He's describing a broader way that Thug allegedly moves, creating division, then standing back and watching the fallout, and now posting tribute videos to the people most affected by that division. Whether you believe Ralo or not, his voice adds weight to the question everyone is quietly asking. Does Thug's public display of loyalty match his private history of behavior? Ralo has also been vocal about Thug, owing apologies not just to Quan's memory, but to Gunna and others who he claims were harmed by how information and narratives were shaped during the YSL trial period. He called the fallout emotional damage, which is actually a precise term for what happens when trust breaks down inside a community that runs on loyalty and proximity. These aren't just rap beefs. These are friendships, business relationships, and street bonds that were shattered. And now one of the central figures in all of it is posting throwback videos and saying he never switched. The internet, predictably, was split right down the middle. One side pulled up the documented evidence. The performances where Thug disrespected Quan by name, the years of silence when a phone call could have fixed things, the fact that Quan had expressed willingness to talk and nothing came of it. The other side pointed to the complexity of the RICO case, the pressure everyone was under, and the very real possibility that things happening in a federal courthouse look a lot different than things happening in a beef between two rappers. And look, here is the part that actually gets me. Thug went on Aiden Ross's stream after Quan died and said he wished they had made amends before it was too late. He said it with what looked like real remorse. Fine. People accepted that. Grief is messy. Nobody expected him to have everything figured out in that moment. But then months pass, and instead of staying in that space of quiet regret, he hops on Instagram with a throwback clip and basically tells the world he was the loyal one the whole time. That is a completely different move. That is not grief anymore. That is reputation management. And Quan's brother saw it for exactly what it was. Dre did not need to write a paragraph. 2 words. Pride and ego, and he said everything, because that is literally what kept these two from fixing things while Quan was still breathing. Not the industry, not the trial, not YF and Lucy, pride. And now that same pride is driving Thug to win an argument against a dead man on social media with Quan's family, watching every single post in real time. Ralo saying Tug STFU is not just a reaction to this week either. That man has been watching Thug move a certain way for years. He sat on that live stream and broke down name by name. Quan, Gunna, Lil Baby, himself, and described a pattern of someone who creates fractures quietly and then shows up loudest at the funeral. Whether every detail Ralo said is accurate is something only the people involved truly know. The fact that multiple people from different corners of Atlanta are telling a similar version of the same story about the same person, that is not nothing. What nobody wants to say directly is this. Thug is out here fighting for his legacy, using Quan's name, and Quan cannot push back. That is the whole problem.